Welcome back to the Becoming Mama podcast, where two long-lost best friends discuss all things motherhood. I am Sam, and I'm here with my co-host, Emmy, as well as our special guest for today, Jess Hull. Jess is the founder of MotherMe, a digital postpartum community focused on giving pregnant women the info they need and the support they deserve to create a peaceful and happy postpartum experience. So welcome, Jess.
Hi, thanks so much for having me. I'm really excited to be here.
I am too. Jess and I met on Instagram and we just talked. Was it that same day or the very next day we had a phone call and just
Pretty
talked about
much.
all things motherhood and matrescence, and it was so wonderful that I was like, okay, we have to have you on the podcast. So do you want to tell us a little bit more about yourself real quick?
Yeah, sure. So I live outside of Boston with my husband and my three kids who are 6, 4, and 1. And I've always had a passion and curiosity for finding out information and what is the story specifically through data. So prior to starting Mother Me, I actually worked for a long time in the tech world. I've worked at Google and Facebook, and my background is consulting brands on how to connect with consumers. So I've been really interested in kind of pursuing my passion on how we can actually help pregnant moms and women through data and sort of support a lot of the emotional feelings that we have with actual real numbers. Um, and a little bit about my motherhood style, as we chatted about pre-show. But my goal is not to be perfect, it's to be prepared. And I am chronically late and always forgetting things. And I think that is enough as a mom. We don't need to be perfect, and we shouldn't teach our children that perfection is the goal either. So
I
thanks for
love
having
that.
me today.
Yeah, I love that so much. So we are going to start with our wins and losses today. We're actually going to remember to do that. And Jess has hers ready. Jess, do you want to go first, or do you want to hear ours first?
Yeah, you guys go first. I'm the guest, so you show me
Okay.
how it's done.
Okay. Em, are you ready? Do you have some?
I'm ready. Yep.
Okay.
Okay, so hey everybody, I'm also here. Sam said I was here, but I haven't spoken yet, so hi.
That was me in the placenta podcast. I didn't talk for 30 minutes.
No, I felt really bad that I didn't call you in sooner. But
Why
anyway,
didn't I say something?
Jess, I don't sense a very strong Boston accent.
Well, I usually say it comes out when I'm drinking, but also my background, my mom is from Cuba, and so she's not from Boston originally, but my dad is like a hardcore Bostonian, Italian American, and when my husband met him, he's like, he has a different language. He's like, oh, where's the charge card? And where's your pocketbook? And all these funny little regional things. But yeah,
Yes, thank you for
yeah.
sharing that. That was exactly what I wanted to hear. More of that. Okay, my wins and losses. I just had to stick that in there. All right. So we had a snowstorm, and I think the win is it's really great. I got to spend an extra day with my kids. They were home. It was beautiful to have them with me. And on the flip side, on the loss side, why does schedule change have to be so stressful as a parent? I just felt the weight of anxiety crushing me down the entire day as I'm like, let's go out in the snow and have fun. And on the inside, I'm boiling until 2:30 when Evie hadn't napped for the whole day, and I was like, then I boiled over. So I just think it can be one in the same. You can be happy and also struggling at the same time. So that's what I've got. Sam, what are yours?
I feel that. My win is that I got to announce my pregnancy this week. So probably most people know by now, but I'm going to be 13 weeks pregnant on Friday. So when this comes out, I'm already 13 weeks pregnant, and we're expecting a girl, and so that's super exciting. And
Congrats.
yeah,
We're pumped.
yeah. So we're gonna do a whole podcast, mini-sode on the pregnancy, how it happened. Well, not specifically how it happened. You guys know how that happened.
Give the people what they want to know, Sam. Come on. How was a baby made?
Yeah, I think if you're listening to this podcast, you probably have that knowledge. But we'll talk about how it's been and all of that. But that's my win. And my loss is I have been sick for the past week already, and then the day after I announced it, I'm so excited to do all this like talking about it, and like I'm just like on cloud nine, and then I got a stomach bug that like knocked me out. Like it's the sickest I have been in years. Like I think I had 400 steps for the day. Like, and that was just going to the bathroom and back to my bed. Like it was terrible. But another win, it was only a 24-hour thing, and I felt pretty good yesterday. So that's my week. Jess, how about you?
Well, I love that there's like silver linings to all of these losses because there really is no loss, but just lessons, right?
Yeah.
So I'll start with some wins. So obviously doing this podcast because I love connecting with you guys. But also this is a goal of mine for 2024 and like being more intentional in doing things that bring me joy and that I love. And I love connecting with people organically. Like Sam said, like I just DM'd her, and it's really nice to find community and other women in the space and showing that there's space for all of us, and that we all bring a different part of the puzzle and working together, and there is no like competition in the space of taking care of moms. So I just think that's like the vibes for 2024. And I'm truly, this is like the highlight of my week, my month is being here with you guys. So thank you. And my loss, I was telling Sam this earlier, but so my youngest daughter, Louise, who is just over 1, spiked a very high fever on New Year's Eve. And my husband and I actually got married on New Year's Eve. So it's also our anniversary, our 8th anniversary. And I had like a weird feeling, and I just went into her room to check on her. And within minutes of me checking on her, she actually had a seizure in my arms. And we have no family history of this. None of my other children have had this, but I ended up waking up my husband, calling 911, and we went in an ambulance to the ER, and she's totally fine now. But we literally celebrated midnight in an ambulance. And she ended up having, and the reason I'm choosing to share this one is because I think it's an important thing for moms to know is that kids can have seizures, not just from the high temperature, but it's actually how quickly the body rises in temperature. So her temperature was 103.5, which obviously is a very high temp. But the doctors said that fevers can also cause seizures, even going from like 98 to 101, if the body goes up that quickly, which was something I did not know. Yeah, so she's okay. But just like my husband and I like looked at each other and we're like, okay, first time celebrating an anniversary in an ambulance. But again, to your points about like the silver lining is like, you know, we didn't know what was happening at the time, but obviously it could have been a very different outcome. So I'm just like so grateful for, health, and grateful to be close to really good hospitals and really great EMTs. And also one of my friends who I called up in the middle of the night came over and was at my house in 5 minutes and was just like so chill and calm. And again, like community, we're not meant to do this alone. Not a loss, but a lesson.
Oh my gosh, that's so scary. And like how crazy that you went in there at that time. Like, wow.
I know.
The
And
intuition is strong.
yeah. And I think like, honestly, as we've all, experienced in our motherhood journey, the reason I feel this way, and like turning up that inner voice and having the confidence to listen to that voice rather than dismiss it, I feel like is like a new skill a lot of us women need to relearn because we've sort of been conditioned to dismiss a lot of those inner gut feelings and instincts. And I think they're actually really important. So
Yeah. Yeah, we talk about that a lot, and I totally agree. We should do a whole podcast on that, Emmy, about like intuitive moments we've had in motherhood, because I've had a lot of them that were like weird, like like something happened that made me do something else that were unrelated, but like because of that, you end up in the right place at the right time, kind of thing. Like,
yes.
those kind of moments. Like,
Yeah,
but we should do a
definitely.
whole podcast on that. Listeners,
Yeah.
tell us your stories, because this would be a good one.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Well, and I
I'm
think
so glad
something
everything turned
too,
out.
to teach our daughters so that they can tune in and listen before their mothers, because I think it would have made my journey a whole lot easier if I learned how to tune in before I even made it, across the motherhood threshold.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Absolutely. Especially they're going to grow up in a world with a lot more technology than we even have now, where it's so easy to just ask the internet versus asking yourself first. So I think that's a really great point, Emmy. Yeah, and I also love your point of like being grateful for health, because that's all I kept thinking when I was sick on Monday was like, I am so grateful this is my problem. Where
Right.
it's like, I know this is gonna pass. And there's a lot of people where that's not the case. And I'm just so grateful this is my problem. It's just it really puts things into perspective. But glad things are better now. And that she's doing well.
Yep.
And I think we should jump into our main topic today. So, if I didn't make it clear at the beginning, our main topic today is going to be preparing for postpartum. So, Jess's expertise. Jess has a program that is a 4-module online program and community that is all about helping moms prepare for matrescence, prepare for the postpartum period so that they can have a better experience. And so today we're going to be kind of picking her brain about how she got into this, why she think it matters, and then asking for a few tips, like what do you think some of the biggest things are, like any do's and don'ts and things like that. So let's start off with right away. How did you get into this topic, Jess?
So, like most people, you start by just trying to solve your own problems. And I had my son first, and then 18 months later, welcomed my daughter. And I felt sort of a waterfall effect of feeling overwhelmed in motherhood and feeling, it started off as feeling overwhelmed. And then further along into motherhood, I just started feeling angry, like, okay, why didn't anyone tell me this? I was so unprepared. And that had a lot of impacts on other parts of my life, not only my health and well being, but my relationship with my husband, how I felt I was showing up as a mom to my big kids. And I just sort of realized the more that I talked to people that everyone really struggled at this point of motherhood. And like my expectations going into it were comical. And I often reference like seeing Angelina Jolie on a magazine cover when she was pregnant with her twins. And like the headline was like, I just love having sex when I'm pregnant. And I'm like, okay, yeah, maybe because you're married to Brad Pitt, but like also as like a teen girl, that like made me think better, like, oh, pregnancy is going to be this like amazing time. And my pregnancies were a little challenging to some degree, but then the postpartum phase, like again, thinking about like references in pop culture, like Kate Middleton walking out of the Lido wing, holding her baby, like absolutely glowing.
Yeah.
Like for my first pregnancy, like I brought a freaking curling iron to the hospital. Like I don't know who I thought was waiting outside those doors for me, but like I just had this really naive, comically naive expectations for postpartum. And then once I lived it, and I often say my first was a roller coaster ride, my second was a crash landing. And to the point where even though my husband and I wanted theoretically to have more kids, the realities of the postpartum made me for a long time say, I'm never doing this again. And you add in a pandemic, and then you're just like, forget this.
Mm-hmm.
I don't want my big kids to suffer. And that is
Mm-hmm.
what held me back from expanding my family, because I knew that that third postpartum stage would either destroy me or my marriage. And worst of all, potentially like my big kids would suffer because I couldn't be the mom that I wanted to be for them. And then, I started doing research because, again, like that curiosity, I was like, well, it clearly doesn't suck for some people because they have more than two kids. Like, fool
Mm-hmm.
me once, fool me twice. Okay, but what about the people who actually have a third? And that really kicked off like this multi-year learning deep dive rabbit hole for me, which is when I discovered not only matrescence, but also a lot of how other countries and cultures support women at this time, and what lessons can be learned from them, and what could be possibly applied here in the US to make the journey just not miserable, but actually like enjoyable, where you feel supportive, you feel loved, you feel seen. And you feel like you can control parts of it to a degree. While we know in birth and in motherhood, there's certain things that are just always out of our control. I wanted to focus on what I could control. So that's what kicked off my curiosity. And then after I felt confident that I could have a third child and it wouldn't destroy me, um, my husband and I talked a lot about all of it, and we got on the same page and we decided to go for it. And then once I lived through that third postpartum, and it was night and day from my first two. And you'd think like having three kids should be more chaos. And it was actually the most calm, the most peaceful, the most joyful postpartum experience that I'd ever had. I was like, I can't keep this to myself. And I started sharing it with friends and family. And then they were like, I want my friend. Can you talk to my friend? Like, I want her to have this. And that's what really made me have that light bulb moment of like, okay, this is something a lot of people need. And I've done all the research and the legwork. So I'm gonna package it up and share it with others.
Wow. That is so relatable for me. And that is what took so long for us to, not that it's so long. My son's 2.5 and we're pregnant, but postpartum was so hard for me that I was really afraid that if I went through that again, that it would ruin my marriage, that it would ruin my son's life, that it would break me again, that I wasn't strong enough, all of those things. And that's what led me down the path of matrescence as well. And I shared on Instagram the other day of like the reality of this decision to have a second was hard. Like it was the hardest thing I've ever done in my marriage. And it was a lot of like heartbreaking conversations of how do you compromise on something like that? And what if I don't want a second? And I always thought I wanted 4 kids and now I don't even want
Right.
a second one. Like who am I? And like I don't think that's true. But when I shared that, so many people said, yeah, I was so scared. I didn't know if I could do it again. And so I think what you're saying is so powerful and so important. And like, thank you for sharing that. That's incredible.
Yeah. No, I think, like you said, it's honestly more common than not. And I
Mm-hmm.
think because people are so unprepared for that postpartum, they have a horrible time. And it makes
Mm-hmm.
them scared because there's a fear of doing it again. And what if it's worse? And now I have a toddler who I also need to take care of. And that's really like my biggest hope with what I'm doing is that by being prepared, it will address that fear. And
Mm-hmm.
when you don't know things, it's so overwhelming. But when you're like, okay, like it's not like nothing, but if I have a plan, then at least I know what I'm going to try to do. And like life still can throw you curveballs, but like having a plan for a lot of women who are organized, people, like that brings a huge amount of comfort. And I think that like most women go to a ton of prenatal appointments. And then also that's a huge problem too, is that after you have the baby, you're really on your own. Um, and then you're just kind of like spiraling. And so without having that plan, you just feel even more overwhelmed with the uncertainty and the loneliness and like the feeling that no one's in your corner helping you
Mm-hmm.
can make it hard to take a big step getting pregnant again.
And then you add all of the societal expectations of postpartum and of motherhood on top of that, of that this should be easy and this should be natural and women have been doing this for millions of years and you should be able to figure it out. You shouldn't need to ask for help and you have no one to talk to. And it can be such a difficult time. And so I love what you're doing. And the planning aspect, that kind of reminds me of you, Emmy, and how you kind of like you had like layered your plans with your kids where it was like, okay, I'm gonna have a better birth and then I'm gonna have a better birth and postpartum. Isn't that kind of what you planned for?
Definitely. And what you were saying, Jess, really made me think about how you said that women will oftentimes feel much more comfortable and much more at ease with when they have that plan in place for postpartum. And for me, having a plan in place allowed me to experience joy because I was so relaxed and comfortable. And And when we have a birth plan, there's sort of a contrast because, like you said, there's so many opportunities for things to go differently or things to go wayside, things to be unexpected. Whereas with postpartum, there can be unexpected things. But if we have the basics in place, nutrition, support people, whatever we're going to do for entertainment, those types of things kind of laid out, it's pretty hard for a wrecking ball to come in and destroy it all. So a lot of times I think that plan really can truly lead to a blissful experience where there's optimal opportunities for bonding with baby, between mom and baby, to happen, and for the whole family to come together as a whole and experience that blissful bonding time. So obviously that's not the case for everyone, but having a plan certainly is going to lead to way more opportunity for that to be the case.
Absolutely. And I think to your point about birth kind of being something that can have a lot of in the moment changes, we do know from the data around matrescence that all women experience the same universal transformations. Even when they have unique challenges that may be specific to their circumstances, there are these universal experiences that we all go through. Our brains all go through these things. Our hormones all go through these things. Nutritionally, we all need these things. And once you understand, it takes some of the mystery, the uncertainty, and the anxiety out of it, because you're like, wait a minute, this isn't just happening to me. This is how my brain is chemically supposed to respond to this. And I'm not like blindsided by this hormonal crash because I'm prepared for it. My partner's prepared for it. And we have, like you said, like a plan in place. And so I remember my husband and I would actually laugh a little bit about some of the hormonal changes in crazy moments because we knew they were just that. They were fleeting, crazy moments. And like I was at the mercy of my body and my chemical response, and it was working as it was designed. And it wasn't this like scary moment of like, who is my wife? Where did she go? It was like, oh, I'm going to help you while you're having this kind of physical, emotional, hormonal response. And then it passes and it's over.
Yeah.
And you can be prepared for it also. So I had the baby blues tincture. I'm pretty sure it's called by, who is it by? One of the really big companies out there that makes tinctures for women during postpartum pregnancy and beyond. So I was actually prepared for that time. I expected that would come, and I had a plan for it. And that's kind of the path we can walk when we're learning about this period together.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Meanwhile, I didn't know. I knew it was a thing, and I just remember, I will never forget actually grabbing my mom's hand and just going, I'm gonna cry. She goes, why? And I go, I don't know. And I just started sobbing. And then she just laughed at me. So it does, being prepared and having that awareness does make a difference. Because then I spiraled from there where I was like, I shouldn't be sad. I should be happy. This is a happy time. And then the shame comes in and you go down the matrescence rabbit hole. So I love all of this. So as we're talking about preparing, do you want to jump into like your 3 to 5 biggest tips for getting prepared?
Yes. And I know, Sam, when we talked a little bit, we were thinking of sort of putting the perspective on this, especially for women in your case, where you're preparing to welcome your second child. So you have a toddler too, or a big kid also in the mix. So sort of filtering the perspective through that. And I would say we've talked a little bit about the different dimensions of postpartum recovery, but starting off with the family unit, the core family unit, I would say a huge to think about, and this isn't a tip one way or the other, but get on the same page with your partner on what you want the experience to be for that big kid meeting their sibling. And I think this is something as moms that we feel like in our bones, where a lot of moms are like worried about how the big kid is going to interpret the sibling arriving and not wanting to create any negative feelings for the big kid that like, you know, something like the mom is going to love them less or be less available or something like that. And I remember similarly having that like emotional moment with my husband being like, I'm so worried about this. And he's like, why? I don't get it at all. That's literally nothing. And when we talked about it and got on the same page, I was like, this is how I want the big kids to meet their sibling. This is how I want the hospital experience to be if you choose to bring the big kid or kids to the hospital to meet the sibling or not. I think that's totally fine to say this time in the hospital is time for me to rest and recover. And it's really a short period of time anyway. So if you have people like grandparents or siblings who can watch your big kid. That's okay. Not everybody needs to rush to the hospital to meet you and meet the baby. And it's okay to have those boundaries. So I would say, like, first thing to do if you're preparing to welcome a new baby is get on the same page with your partner on what that experience means through the eyes of your little one. And for us, we chose to bring our kids to the hospital because they were really excited to do that. And at that point in the COVID pandemic, they were allowed to come. And what we did was had presents for all of the kids to give each other. And so we had the baby give the big kids presents. So they left the hospital with a stuffed animal and like something that they were like, oh, this is from my new baby. And, for us, it was very important that the big kids felt comfortable touching the baby, kissing the baby, and like not stifling that sort of childlike desire to connect. And so we talked about it. The baby was born in November, runny noses obviously happening, coughs happening. And we were like, let's just have them wash their hands. But like, we want them to kiss the baby for a minute. That's not going to stress me out. That's not going to stress my husband out. So I think having a plan on that experience would be a huge building block for how the postpartum is going to go.
Definitely have that fear. Definitely have that fear. I am extremely attached to my son. My son is extremely attached to me. And I've talked about that a bunch on this podcast, how special that relationship is. And I know that's a lot of people were there first. And that was a big fear of my husband's, actually. He really wanted our time and energy to go to Teddy. And he was afraid of dividing that attention. And so when it comes to baby, it's already a big conversation piece in our house, and that's a really helpful tip for me right now.
And I would say the second thing to think about is now coming home from the hospital. And it's funny when they give you the guidelines, don't lift anything heavier than the baby. And you're like, what about my 25-pound, 3-year-old or whatever? And that can be a really hard thing for moms to be like, I can't lift my first baby. Early that you can't carry your child in the way that you historically have, you can still cuddle in bed with your big kid. You can still next they're in the tub, sit with them in the tub, and then have somebody else lift them out of the tub. And that's a temporary moment that is ultimately for your long-term health, which means it's for your child's long-term health, because so many women end up having problems and doing serious damage to their core by doing too much too fast. And one very small practical thing that I like to do, because emptying the dishwasher can actually really aggravate your core muscles, and that's a motion that you do a lot, or like moving things from the washer to the dryer. When it comes to dishes, we just got all paper plates, and I went to the dollar store and I got like Louis plates, I got Mario plates, I got Baby Yoda plates, fun little paper plates for my kids to use, so that we really didn't have to do a lot of dishes to limit the dishwasher. And obviously my husband would empty the dishwasher. We had other people who could help with that. But keeping in mind that the temporary physical recovery that you do need as a mom is actually in the best interest of your child. So saying no to some of those physical things, while hard because of what they mean to you emotionally, try to find other ways to connect without injuring yourself in the long run.
I love that. And I love the paper plate thing because it makes me think of all the other ways to like temporarily change your daily routines to make life a little easier. Like, we're not a paper plate family. My parents are a paper plate family. And every time I'm home, I'm like, why? There's two of you. How often are you doing dishes? Like, come on, let's think about it, you guys. But we're not. But over the holidays when we're super busy, sometimes we use paper plates. And like, what a wonderful tip. And it's got me thinking of what are some of the other ways we can make life a little easier, whether that's like, or grab and go snacks or freezer meals and things like that I wouldn't typically do. But I really love that tip.
I would say like allowing yourself permission to make temporary accommodations. And like, I'm also like an environmentally conscious person. Like, I don't like using paper plates if I don't need to. I don't mind washing stuff. But this moment, I'm not saying I'm going to do this for the next 20 years. I'm going to do this for the next month or the next month and a half. And it's a small thing, and I'm going to plant a tree to offset this or whatever it is. You don't even need to feel guilty about it. But for people that might, remind yourself that all of these things are temporary and it's okay. You don't need permission to do them. But if you feel better giving yourself that permission, then do it. And another sort of very common physical movement that people don't realize may be doing long-term damage is putting the big kid in the car seat and getting out of the car seat. And if your son is approaching the age where he's really trying to assert his independence, you can use that as a time to practice him climbing into the car seat on his own, and maybe even doing the top buckle on his own, and view that growth as you're helping him become more independent, not like, I can no longer do these things for him, so I'm a failure. You're actually helping him be more independent. And my kids actually, they love to take my cell phone and unbuckle their bottom part of the 5-point harness, because it's hard for them to push that button themselves. But you're like, I want to do it. I want to unbuckle myself. And I'm like, as long as it's safe to do it, you can always unbuckle yourself. And I'm like, it's meanwhile, because I can't climb back there and do it. So it's like framing some of those things not as losses, to go back to our wins and losses, not as losses in your life, but as like lessons you're helping them learn. And that's what you should be doing as a mom. You're not doing it as a point of weakness. I would say another tip that comes to mind, and this is something people said to me a lot, especially when I was pregnant with my third, you have a baby shower for your third, right? Nobody does. It'd be silly, but people would be like, oh, well, like, you're an old pro. Like, you've got this. Like, you don't need any help. And I'm like, actually, quite the opposite. I need more help. And so for my third, I actually learned how to ask for help in a way that I didn't feel was putting anybody in a funny position, but also in a way that was specific, and gave people an out. But for people who I knew wanted to help, but just assumed that I didn't really need the help, I think the more kids you have, the more help you do need, and the more empowered you should feel to ask for it. So actually, like, one of the things that I have in my course is actually like Mad Libs, ways to ask for help, because women feel so uncomfortable asking for help. And when you remove that like personal level of it, when I tell people like, just practice saying this out loud to me, just practice saying it, fill in the Mad Lib, ask for something you need, whether it's a small thing like water, have a pitcher of water by my bed every day. Or if it's something like, I don't need any help with the baby, but I'd love it if you could take Teddy out to a playground so I could get 2 hours of peace and quiet. And like, you can even take my car, which already has the car seats in it, or something like that. I think asking for help is a sign of strength. And another saying that I have is like, discipline, self-discipline is a sign of self-love. So like, I'm asking for these things because I love myself and I want to take care of myself. And by taking care of myself, I'm taking care of my family, and viewing asking for help as a sign of strength and self-love rather than a sign of weakness.
Again, I love that tip. I have already asked my mom and husband, this is the household stuff I would love for you to be in charge of, and this is the household stuff I would love for you to be in charge of, like the parenting aspects, even just for those first 15 days, so I can have the time to recover, which was so opposite from the first time, where it was like, the minute I got home from the hospital, I was like, no, I should be walking upstairs to change the diaper. No, I should be making the meals. No, I should be Swiftering. No, I should be doing this because I'm the mom, and moms do everything, and moms are supposed to be able to do everything. You just have those expectations. I love that. And with the act of asking for help, I love the idea of the Mad Lib, because you're right. It's so hard to do that. And we often walk it back, right? Could you help me with this if you want to, if you're available, if it's not too much of a, like, people wouldn't offer help if they didn't mean it. And if they don't mean it, they won't show up.
Right.
Right? They offer the help.
Right.
At least that's my experience. I don't know about you guys, but I always feel like if I offer you my help and you don't take it, I might be even a little offended, because like, I want to help you. I love you. I want to be there for you. Let me love you. Let me support you. And don't just assume I don't mean it.
Right. I think that one of the things that holds women back from accepting help is they feel they could not reciprocate. So I had some friends who already have 6, 8, 10-year-old children, and they wanted to help and do stuff for me with my third baby. And the old Jess would have been like, oh my God, but like, you're never going to have a baby. So like, I could never like do that for them. So like, I can't accept that from them because how can I ever repay them? And I think what we have to learn as women and as a society is what we need to do is pay it forward. And it's not about repaying the person who gave it to you. It's about saying, hey, somebody helped me in my time of need. Like my friend who came over when I called her when I needed to hop in an ambulance. Her child, God willing, will never be in an ambulance. But if somebody else calls me, I learned how to show up for them because she taught me that. And so accepting help in postpartum from people who may or may not ever have children or be done having children or whatever it is, it's not about you directly paying that person back. It's about putting that kindness and compassion back into the world and helping another woman when you are in a position to help somebody else. Like 4 years from now, when you have kids in elementary school and your friend is having a baby or your neighbor, you're like, hey, that really meant a lot to me when somebody did that. I'm going to do that for that person. And that's like what I think people need to realize if they have a hard time accepting help is letting go of the idea of paying it back to that person who gave it to you. I would just say last tip that I think everybody probably had their own experience with, but becoming a mom, whether it's for the first time, second time, third time, fourth time, whatever, is still going to have an impact on your relationship with your partner. And who my husband was as a first time dad is different who he is as a third time dad. And we've both understood that growth, our own personal growth in that parenthood journey, and the importance of us staying connected. And what our connection looks like today is very different than what it looked like pre-kids, what it looked very different when we had a newborn who all grandparents were happy to watch because it was the first, and finding time to have those moments of connection with your partner. Again, it's an easy thing to neglect as the chaos of having more kids is a reality, but view taking care of your relationship as taking care of your children. And the Gottman Institute is of course one of the founding family institutes on this research. And again, like my program, I spend a lot of time talking about ways to connect with your partner when time is limited, when energy is limited, and when emotions are also running high. But there are simple things you can do. Like I love when my husband just like rubs my shoulder. And when I told him that, he was like, really? He's like, why have you never told me that? We've been together for 15 years. I'm like, I don't know. I guess I never realized that I needed it and realized, and it's like little things like that can make a huge difference. And just putting your phones down and having 15 minutes of screen free time with each other, whether it's like just joking in the kitchen or whether it's laying in bed and just kind of like, God, we survived another day. Like many moments of connection will help you withstand your relationship in these times of limited time and energy.
That's very true, and that was a very difficult thing for us in our first experience because we eventually understood we were going to have to do some like, shifts because my son didn't sleep. And I remember my husband, who's not a very emotional person, he's not a speak his feelings person, he laid down in bed and he just said, I miss you.
Aww.
And I was like, I miss you too. Then it was, what did we do? How did we get here? What were we thinking? And when we were having those conversations, did we have a second? That was huge on my mind of like, I choose a healthy marriage over a second child because that's going to affect my son more than anything, right?
Right.
But that's something that has to stay a priority, and that's hard. That's hard.
And it gets harder as the kids get older and their needs change and they have their own emotional tantrums. How you respond to a tantrum is probably different than how your husband would respond. And like, I don't know if you guys listen to the podcast Smartless at all. Jason Bateman, Sean Hayes, and Will Arnett, and they have all these different guests from Hollywood, and they talk about all these different things. And they had on Ron Howard, who's a director, and they asked him, like, how do you deal with people on set actors who come in with strong opinions and almost kind of like be a director, and you're like, yo, I'm the director. And I view that a lot as through the eyes of motherhood, where I'm like, yo, I'm the director. But he said that in an experience with Tom Hanks, that Hanks came in and wanted to try these different ways of doing the scene. And he said, is this choice going to ultimately change the plot? No. Is it a different way of getting to the same place? Yeah. I don't know if it's going to work or not, but I'm going to let him try it because it doesn't ultimately change the outcome. And so I have like in my head so many times when my husband will do things very differently than how I would do it, where I'm like, is this endangering the kid? No. Is this like damaging the kid? No. Is it just different than what I would do? Yes. But like, doesn't change the outcome. It actually makes people feel empowered that they're trusted to make a different choice and to have the freedom to do so, even if it doesn't end up working out. Like saying, like, we are in this together and our goal is to raise healthy and happy children. Like an example of how my husband and I approach something very differently is bedtime, where he will like amp up the silliness at bedtime. And I'm like, yo, I'm trying to like calm it down. And like the vibes have been filled and, you know, ready for story time. And he's like, let's play tag. And he's like, I want to run him ragged. And I'm like, okay, it's not my approach, but to his credit, most of the time it does work. But it is very different than how I would approach it. And we are a team. And so I think with your partner and having more kids and more to deal with, like empowering them to make their own choices and saying like, I recognize your approach is different. It doesn't mean it's better or worse than mine, but like, I trust you to try it because it's not endangering our children. It's just different from what I would do. And that's okay.
That's a really cool way to think about it. I wonder, this is a side tangent, but I wonder if that, because I have the same experience where like my husband and my son are super silly at bedtime. I can hear them through the walls and I'm like, this is like, what are you doing? But I wonder if, I know a lot of that, there's been like a lot on social media recently about how kids get their oxytocin from their playing with their fathers versus like cuddling with their moms. So I wonder if that actually is in a way calming them down just via play versus like if it were me doing it to them, like it might, or to him it might not be the same outcome, but he's feeling loved, he's feeling happy, he's feeling secure now and ready to be in bed. I don't know.
Absolutely. No, I think I've seen that as well. And I think that's awesome because that ultimately is celebrating people's different strengths. And we have different things that we can give to our children. And the second we let go of sort of the expectations, right? Like that sort of theme of parenthood is like, love these expectations. Like everything needs to be the same or equal on paper in order for it to be beneficial. But I do, because I'm kind of like that, like squealing and running around like at time. I have said, oh, you want to play tag? Great. I'm going to go take a hot shower. And so I use that as my time. And then it ends up actually being everybody gets what they need in that moment. So it's been actually like a good thing to reframe some of those differences. Again, cause no harm to the children, right? Like if anybody were to do something dangerous, like, I'm going to take you for a drive without a car seat. You'd be like, okay, no, that does change the plot. I'm sorry. That scene is not being filmed today.
Before we wrap up, I mean, do you have any other questions or comments?
I don't think so. So much of what you said were things that I truly needed to hear today, even though I am not nearing any kind of postpartum period, just as a mom of 3. Can really relate to a lot of the things that you shared are their daily situations that come up for me. So thank you so much for everything you had to communicate and share with us.
Yeah, I so value this, and I'm going to be following your work very closely as I approach postpartum. And I think Emmy talked about doing a podcast about planning for postpartum and sharing with her what I'm going to do and having her poke holes in it and give me some suggestions and stuff like that, because she's my guiding light in a lot of things, birth and postpartum. Before we wrap up, can you tell us a little bit about your program and some of your offerings and where people can find you and connect with you?
Yes, of course. Any listeners out there who are currently pregnant and they also feel like, hey, I would benefit from understanding more of the changes, you know, to my brain and body, relationships and social changes, emotional changes. Program is made up of on-demand video modules. So what I like about that and why I did that is because I am more of a visual learner myself. There's great books out there, and I have actually read, if not like many of them. It's really hard to read, and I have very low energy at night, so I prefer to watch things. And so I wanted to create a course that women could watch in bite-sized, snackable videos on a variety of topics, like what happens to your brain when you are sleep deprived, or what is actually the proper way to rest and recover. So they're things that are practical, but they're rooted in science and many of the global perspectives on postpartum support that I feel we needed to translate and make them actually realistic for us here in the US when we don't have a tribe of women who we can go live with for 6 weeks. There are still things we can do. So I focus on the info that people need, and I break it down into a what, why, how format. So what's happening? Why does it matter? And how can I take care of myself? So it's really simple, easy to digest, and like kind of half kidding, but like if you're brain dead like me, you can actually still absorb this information because it's high impact but simple content. The app just really key is the support aspect. Every woman who joins the program can join our weekly calls, whether you're pregnant or postpartum, get access to those calls for your entire pregnancy and then for the full 12 weeks after you have your baby, with the option to extend if you want to stay in the moms group. And then I also have a one-on-one call with every woman in her third trimester to map out her specific personalized recovery plan across all of these dimensions: sleep, food, rest, recovery, emotional support, physical, every dimension, hormonal. So it's customized to you. And then I'm your accountability partner. And you can practice those conversations with me that you need to have. And, we really make sure that you know how to advocate for yourself. So really that's what it boils down to is like, let's stop being overwhelmed. Let's stop dreading what is actually a beautiful phase of life. And how we do that is by having the info we need, being prepared, having that plan. And like you said, Emmy, like having a plan allows you to have space for joy. You're getting rid of the anxiety. You're getting rid of the unknown. And you do know that if things do take a curveball, like you have a support network in place. The website is motherme.io, and that is the same for our Instagram handle. It's motherme.io. You can check out my Instagram. I have a free postpartum checklist that you can sign up for there. I have a free training you can watch that goes into a lot of these concepts in matrescence a little bit more detail. And you can see the whole program on motherme.io. But I would love to have others join the podcast or join the program. And I'm happy to do actual sort of promotional pricing for any members of the Becoming Mama.
Awesome. That's so wonderful and sounds like such a comprehensive program and like perfect for moms who need things to happen on their own time, need that support network, and especially in this day and age where we are not as connected as a society, to have that connection piece is just so wonderful. So thank you for creating what you've created. I'll make sure to put all of that down in the show notes. And thank you so much for being here today. And thank you all for being here today. Again, to find Jess and all of her resources, that will be linked down below in the show notes. To find Emmy and myself, our websites and our social medias, you will find those below as well. Be sure that wherever you are listening, Apple Podcast or Spotify, give us a 5-star rating, write us a review. That helps us a ton. If you're watching on YouTube, make sure to like, comment, subscribe, all those fun things. And we will be back with another episode next week. Thank you for being here.